There we go. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. This should be going in just a second here. To have everyone's attention, this should be rolling in just a moment. There we go. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. That was my fault. I wanted to blame it on technology, and I apologize for that. I kind of got ahead of myself and forgot to press one of the buttons. So we're starting a couple minutes late, and I apologize for that. But welcome, everyone, to another installment of Miller Time. I'm State Representative Tim Miller. I serve District 17A here in Minnesota, which includes 4 counties: Swift, Chippewa, Renville, and I have 4 townships in Kansas County. For those that aren't familiar with the area, if you live in Minnesota, I'm about 110 miles straight west of the Twin Cities. That's where I serve. I'm actually coming to you live right now out of St. Paul. We're in session right now, and so I set my studio up out here, and it's portable, and so hopefully we can get going on things right now. So again, I really appreciate your patience. Just a reminder, this show is intended to talk about issues that are important to my district and the state of Minnesota. Now, what does that mean? That means we're going to be talking about, I'm in competition with President Trump right now. Well, lucky me, right? Well, you can always watch us on a recording later also, because I think you should probably watch him first. But I'm going to keep going, and we'll do the best that we can this evening. I kind of got started off to a rocky spot when I forgot to hit one of my key buttons to make this thing work. So we'll do that. Now, before I say anything else, and I'll put this in the chat also, so if anyone sees this later, they can see that I will not be airing next Monday night. I have a responsibility in the Minnesota House of Representatives Monday night that's going to keep me from airing at 7 o'clock. I might move it back to 9 o'clock. I'll let you know. Stay tuned, either on Facebook or in my email, or I'll make mention of it here if you kind of sign in. If you're subscribed to this channel, it should give an update of that. I'm not positive. I might try and push it back to 9 o'clock next week, but even that might be risky. So we'll see what we can do. I appreciate it, Richard, that you're watching here. Hopefully, we'll be able to hear what President Trump is doing later. Hopefully, people are watching, then they can see what I'm doing later. So let's get right into it. Again, I'm sorry I feel a little bit out of whack because I couldn't get this thing going and I couldn't figure out why at first. Tonight, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about 2 bills that passed off the House floor last Thursday night. They're both gun control bills. They were House Files 8 and House Files 9 from last year. They were a top priority of the Democrat majority. You can tell the priority of bills if it's in the top 10. So House Files 8 and 9 are in their top 10. So these are 2 of the bills that they felt were top 10 in their agenda. And I'm going to discuss what each of those bills are a little bit. If you have any questions, by all means, make sure that you ask those via the chat. I'll be happy to respond to those. But what I want to spend a little bit of time as well tonight on is not only what's in the bills themselves. One of the things that I really want to be able to do for people through this live stream is to give you kind of an understanding of the way things work in your state government, at least from one legislator's perspective. Give you a little peek behind the curtain sometimes, to give you a little bit of a what does this mean. And I think this is a good time this week to give somewhat of an example of that. First of all, you might be asking, well, why am I bringing up 2 bills that passed off of the House floor last week, House Files 8 and 9, 2 gun control bills? Why would I want to be talking about that? Well, certainly I want to talk about it because I can tell you I was not supportive of those at all. And I can tell you that not only in my district, but most of Minnesota, people are not supportive of these gun control bills. They believe that our Second Amendment affords us certain rights, and we already have enough laws on the books. Right now in Minnesota, my good friend, State Representative Steve Drazkowski, held up a whole folder of current law on gun control in Minnesota, and it's almost 120 pages of current law that really addresses most of the tenets of what they purport to be supporting through these two bills. So why would they present these bills anyway? Well, I'll get to that here in a few minutes, but I want to tell you what the bills were about. I won't go too deep, but I will go into them a little bit. If you want to know more about any of these bills, either, again, on the chat tonight, we can discuss it, or certainly contact me. You can always connect with me through my email. That's probably the easiest way to connect with me, and that's rep.tim.miller@house.mn. You can go to the Minnesota House of Representatives website, click on members, find my name, and you can get my phone number, email there, and I'd be happy to discuss things further with you. So the first bill that we are going to be discussing was House File 8. And now this is kind of referred to as a couple different things. It's the universal background check, they call it. It really isn't that. And actually what I usually refer to it as is the universal registration bill, because in order to do this, everyone's going to have to register all of their guns. Now, in fairness, House File 8 isn't exactly that either anymore. They came forward with that originally last year, but through amendments and through changes, they kind of dialed back, and they came with what they thought would be a palatable bill for most people. It's not palatable for me at all. But rather than having a database, that's the big concern here, rather than having a database of all registered guns, which would be every single one, what they said is if you transfer a firearm, you have to record that. You have to register that. Now, what does that look like? Here's basically the way that it works. Let's say that I purchase a rifle, a hunting rifle from you, okay? What we would do is we would fill out a receipt, and it would have what the purchase was, when it was, serial number with that. And since you sold it to me, we would both be required to keep the paperwork, copies of that paperwork for each of us. You would have to keep it, I would have to keep it. Now, here's the deal, is you have to keep that paperwork for 20 years, okay? Now think about that. Think about a piece of paper that you stick away somewhere. Think of 20 years ago and the papers that you had on file somewhere. Also remember that your taxes, you only have to keep for 7 years. There's corporate law for taxes and other records that you only have to keep for 7 years. There's nothing else that you have to keep for 20 years. Now, on top of that, let's say you lose it. Now, by the way, that's not only losing the receipt, but also if there's supporting paperwork with it. If you lose any single page of that paperwork for that 20 years, and law enforcement comes and asks for that receipt, and you don't have it, that's a gross misdemeanor. Now, understand that other crimes that are equivalent to gross misdemeanor is like physical assault of your spouse, injuring someone under a DUI. These are very serious crimes. And yet if you just don't have a piece of paper 19 years later, you're guilty of a gross misdemeanor. We think that this is unreasonable. We think it's unreasonable to keep things that long. And also, here's another problem that we have with it. So you sold me that gun, okay? You sold me the gun. I give you the receipt. Well, this includes all transfers, not just sales and purchases of guns. This includes any transfer. So let's say rather than you selling me a hunting gun, I say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be going hunting up north. I don't have the right rifle. You got a really good one. Can I use it? You're a friend of mine, and you say, sure, you can use it. That requires the exact same receipt. Okay? And as long as I have that gun, you have to keep that receipt for 20 years. Now, if I give it back to you afterwards, we have to exchange that receipt again, that you have it back. And you have to keep that receipt for 20 years. Follow where I'm going with this? So it's a bit radical. It's a bit crazy. I'll get to what I really think they're behind. Like I said, I'm sorry to keep teasing, but I want to give you a little peek behind the scenes. Let me go on to House File 9 first before I do that. We're just going to spend a couple minutes on this. Richard asked the question, how likely is this pass to the Senate? It's not going to pass the Senate at all. They're not even going to hear it. That's going to get to what I want to talk about in the second half of this show. Why are they doing this if it's not going to pass the Senate? It's a great question, but it's not going to pass the Senate. Now, I will tell you that right now in the Minnesota Senate, there is a 2-vote Republican majority. And the majority leader, Paul Gazelka in the Senate, said he will not address these bills. It's going to basically die there. But the Democrats in the House have said, in the Senate, have said if they have control of the Senate, they are going to hear it. So we are 2 votes away from these things being passed in the House and in the Senate, and Governor Walz has already said that he would sign both of these bills into law. So that's the firewall that we have right now, a 2-vote majority. We'll be talking about that also, what that looks like in the upcoming election. Before we do that, I want to spend about 5 minutes on the second bill. People have heard more about this around the nation. It's made the news more, and it's referred to as the red flag law. Now, in different states, the red flag law can look a lot of different ways. Some are a little bit more controlling, some a little bit less. But basically and fundamentally, what a red flag law does is it says this: if there is someone that is a danger to themselves or a danger to those around them, law enforcement is empowered to go and take weapons from that person. Now, on its face, we would say, well, we don't want to have people that are a threat to themselves or to others to have those weapons. Well, the devil's in the details, as they say. And there's a couple things to note. First of all, before I tell you what's in the bill, so first of all, remember that 119 or 20 pages of current statute on gun control? This stuff is already stated. There's a long list of reasons why weapons can be confiscated from someone. Mental illness, legitimate threats. I should have brought the list with me so that I could read down the list. But when you looked at the list on the House floor, Representative Steve Drazkowski asked one of the co-authors to this bill, is there anything on that bill that's missed? Is there anything, or current law, sorry, is there anything in current law that's missed that you are adding in this? And they admitted, no, there's no new person. So current law already addresses this issue. Now, here's the problem with the red flag bill as presented in the state of Minnesota, which I haven't seen one that I would support regardless. I'm not going to. I think the Second Amendment gives us protections. Be very clear for the people listening. I'm going to vote no on any bill that adds control over your ownership of weapons. I'm just not going to support it. So what this red flag bill does is, again, if it says if anyone would injure someone else or themselves, well, what does injure mean? Well, cause injury, I think is the way that it's said. Well, cause injury, let's say you punched me in the arm and I said, ow. It caused injury, okay? There's a very low threshold for that. Here's another challenge is that the people reporting you, they can say, hey, I think Tim is a danger to himself in this way, okay? And they report that to law enforcement. There is a process that's written in this bill in which it goes to a judge. Now, that in and of itself is a good thing, but it's an ex parte hearing. Now, what that means is I'm not allowed to, let's say I hit you or I did something to you and you think that I'm a threat, whatever. I don't want to convolute this, but let's say it's me that you're coming to get my weapons, okay? I'm not invited to that hearing. The judge just listens to the case, and I believe it's beyond a preponderance, which means just a little bit more likely than less likely that I'm a danger, they'll execute that order. Now here's the next problem. So now law enforcement is faced with taking weapons away from me. And I have about a 24-hour notice that they're coming. See the problems with this for law enforcement? I've spoken to one of my sheriffs in my district, and I had voluntarily I had a police chief from another place, not my district, but another district, write me, and they both said this: we don't want to do that. Why don't they want to do this? Well, they don't know the situation. It's a volatile situation. You're coming to take 2 guns. What about the other 4 guns? What if you're coming and someone else lives in the house and they say it's their guns? Then what do? You put law enforcement in a really difficult position. Here's another problem beyond that. So let's say they confiscate the weapons, okay? Now, you have a right to get those weapons back after it changed. It used to be 6 months. I can't honestly say. I need to have a copy of that bill in front of me right now. Should have been prepared for that part. But I think it was 6 months. Might still be. Might have changed. But I know that it's somewhere in between 3 and 6 months that they confiscate these weapons. You can get them back, but a judge can say, no, he shouldn't have them for a little bit longer. And my ability to get those back is higher than that preponderance. It is a very high standard by which I have to now prove that I get those weapons back. You see the problems with that. Here's another problem. Those weapons, where do they get stored when they are gone from your possession? Well, law enforcement doesn't typically have a climate-controlled facility. They typically put it in a back room where there's some storage space. We've seen pictures where they're just set up in a 5-gallon bucket and just stacked in there. Your weapons. Now, what happens if it's a very expensive weapon? What happens if it's a collectible weapon? What are the conditions? What if it's during the humid summer, and what happens to that weapon? It rusts. The law enforcement is not responsible for the conditions of that when you can return. So there's lots of things that are wrong with this red flag bill. Lots of things wrong with the registration bill. They did both pass the House of Representatives, as I told Mr. Jenny. They are not going to be going through the Senate, so they're going to die this year. So in the remaining time, the question begs, why did this happen? Matter of fact, why did this happen when these bills both passed off of the House floor last year? Now, technically in a biennium, once they pass off the House floor, they just sit there for the Senate to take up, not take up, what have you. They did not need to advance these in any way. Even if they made changes, they can include those changes after the Senate hears and passes something different. They go into... I will get to that also. Thank you, Mr. Jenny. Your update on Second Amendment sanctuary counties in Minnesota. I'm going to give you that as well. Thanks for that reminder. It was kind of off my mind for a second there, but I will get that. Let me write that down. Sanctuary counties. Okay, let me quick wrap up here with this first. So why are they doing this? Well, as I said in the beginning, I want to give you a peek into how things work in the legislature. Now, there's majorities and there's minorities. Right now in the Minnesota House of Representatives, they have a Democrat majority. In the Senate, there's a Republican majority by 2 seats, as I told you. There's an election coming up this November. These gun laws have been brought forward. There's a major group. There's a couple groups working on this, but one of them is Moms Demand Action. I don't know if you've heard of that before here in Minnesota. It's pretty prevalent in the suburbs. And that was an activist group that came forward and said, after some school shootings, we need gun control. We need gun control of some type. We need to protect our children on this. I don't see the logic in it, by the way, but that was compelling for a lot of people. Well, Moms Demand Action was funded and is funded, wait for it, by presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg. He's the one that's funded it in this state and many, many states throughout the U.S. He's using this as a tactic to go in. Now, why the suburbs? Why did they go into the suburbs? Well, there's a belief, there was some polling in the last 2 years, that the soccer mom, as they call it, is very sensitive. They'd rather see no guns at all and their children being protected in the schools than you having your rights to own a gun if they perceive that could be a threat on their kids, which, by the way, it's not a threat on their kids, but if people keep telling them that, they're going to believe that. And the suburban mom is not likely to have weapons of their own, and so there you have it. So that is the reason why this is happening this year. They are looking to gain in the Senate some suburban seats. They are looking to solidify the re-election of some Democrats that were elected last time in those suburban seats. Now, I live in rural Minnesota. Okay, I live in greater Minnesota, as we like to call it. Some people call it greatest Minnesota. Can't deny that either. It's wonderful to live out where we live. But this issue, by far and away, people support their Second Amendment rights. They don't want these gun control laws. But if they get the majorities in the House and Senate through the suburbs, they can pass them anyway. So this is nothing more than a political move. I do believe that there are people in the House and in the Senate that do believe there needs to be more gun control. I talked to Representative Edelson out of Edina. We had a discussion. She started the Moms Demand Action in Edina, so I know that she supports this. But I will tell you that when I talked to her about some of these issues, she didn't have a full understanding of my side of the story. So that is a good lesson also when you talk to people. Make sure you explain to people not only don't take away my guns, but also here's the reasons why we think that we should not have new laws. It's our Second Amendment rights to bear arms without restrictions. And if you want to tell them if there's any laws that are needed, our biggest issue is that the current laws that we have on the books aren't even enforced, and that's a problem as well. So in the remaining couple minutes, if you've watched before, you know this, I like to keep this show to about a half an hour. Not spot on, this isn't network TV, so we don't have to worry about commercial breaks or going into the next show. But I do like to respect your time, and hopefully the information that I dispense with here will all fit within a half an hour. We were supposed to have a special guest. I kind of teased that on Facebook tonight. I was going to have my roommate here in St. Paul, Representative Jeff Backer. He was going to join me here tonight, but he got delayed at another meeting, so maybe he'll be here in the near future. But as we kind of add to content, as we start doing more than just this black background and just me talking to you about a couple bills as we develop this, it may extend a little bit longer, but right now, a half an hour is plenty. Who knows? For some, maybe it's too much, right? So Richard had asked about the Second Amendment sanctuary counties, and I'm glad that he asked that. One of the challenges we have with defending the Second Amendment is just that. We defend it. We kind of hold the defensive line and we say, you're not going to come any further, are we? Not going to come any further, are we? It's very difficult to go on the offensive on this issue. One of the biggest reasons is we could pass legislation that says we're going to prove our Second Amendment rights, but there's a lot of people that say the Constitution already grants us that. And if you start passing laws that look like they're, if you will, proving the Second Amendment, you could set things up for fail with that. And so it just doesn't serve any purpose other than to create more arguments. However, something came up in the last several months that we think that people that are gun owners, people that support our Second Amendment rights, there is something that we can do. So if you remember after the elections in the fall, Virginia, the state of Virginia basically totally flipped over to a Democrat-run state. And one of the first things that their governor said was that we're going to pass gun control legislation. We're going to pass it swiftly, and it's going to be strong, and you're not going to be able to stop us, sort of thing. And so what was born out of that was counties in Virginia started passing resolutions saying this is a sanctuary county for the Second Amendment. Second Amendment sanctuary county. There's some other phrases that have been used for that. Different types of resolutions, but basically that's what happened. Right now I can tell you that in Virginia over 80%, I think it's closer to 90% of the counties are now sanctuary counties in Virginia. Well, what happened was as we got into the winter, we didn't start session until February 11th, but some of this is spreading into other states. And out of Virginia, some people brought this into the state of Minnesota up north. I believe Roseau was the first county that the county commissioners passed a resolution that said they are going to be a Second Amendment sanctuary county. And then Kittson County, I believe, followed. I don't know the exact order, but right now there's about 4 counties in Minnesota that are sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment. And there's about 3 to 5 more that are considering that. Well, as this is moving forward, myself and a handful of other legislators, there's different people handling this different ways, but we had some concerns that counties weren't receiving necessarily enough information. I don't want to say the right information. They're smart enough to figure that out themselves. Or maybe the better way to say it is proper information on how to address this. We sort of have access to what's going on in Virginia a little bit easier than they can. So what we came to the conclusion of is we have put together, it's almost done, but we basically put together what we are calling a Second Amendment Sanctuary County Toolkit. A lot of words, don't have a fancy way to call it, but we put together this toolkit to equip counties that if they were to want to proceed forward with something like this, they will have a sample resolution patterned after a resolution in Virginia. I think it's very close to the Roseau County, very similar. We've made a couple adaptations, so I don't know exactly word for word where it's at or what they even passed up there, but it's very similar. This is language that a county could use to say we are a sanctuary county. And what it basically says is we will not support any laws that infringe on people's Second Amendment rights, and some of them are even stronger and say we will basically fight, or if you will, financially support lawsuits should they come and say sanctuary county. You're going to do this. Now, there's lots of implications with that, and that's why we did a toolkit. So another thing that we did with the toolkit is we have a question and answer sheet that basically raises the questions. Well, why do we have to do this now? Don't have to do it now, but here's the concerns. Something passed the Minnesota House. Senate is 2 votes away. These laws could be coming our way. Is it enforceable by law? We answer a question like that. So this toolkit has a resolution, has the questions and answers. Then it also has a listing of some county commissioners from the counties that have already passed these resolutions so that the counties can go and talk to them. Now, when I say counties, get to that. This would be a resolution passed by county commissioners in a county. I think there's always 5 commissioners in a county. There might be a county out there that there's an exception. So they would get this information presented to them, and they would either pass, support, or not pass a resolution. The other people that we want to be very respectful of are the county sheriffs. We're sensitive to the fact that they're uncomfortable with these gun control laws, especially the red flag, but they are the primary law enforcement in a county, and we want to respect that also. So this is really important to understand with this as these go to your counties. We believe we needed to equip counties because as these start spreading through Minnesota, we're going to have citizens going to their county commissioners and saying, hey, we want to be a sanctuary county. And we don't want our county commissioners to say, well, what does that even mean? And then they start scrambling. We want to equip them. Okay, we want to equip the sheriffs, but in the end, this is up to those county commissioners, in my opinion, with the recommendation of that sheriff. And so we're going to be sending all this information to them. It's for the county to decide. So I want to be clear. I think it's a very good idea for a county to do this. I think it's an appropriate time for counties to do this. I know there's more counties that are considering this in Minnesota. I think it needs to be taken very, very seriously at this time. We are in very troubling times with our Second Amendment rights, okay? But my encouragement ends there. It's not for me to tell county commissioners what to do. It's not for me to get you all whooped up and excited and worked up and said, you know, there's trouble in River City and you got to do something about it. I want to be able to encourage, but I want to emphasize that that is the decision of those county commissioners. Now, those county commissioners represent you just like I represent you. So it is incumbent upon you and other people that have an interest in this to talk to them. Okay, do you see how that all fits? I don't want to be overly deliberate or dogmatic on it. I just want you to understand what the intent is. There's a lot of information that comes forward all the time, and we want to make sure that it's delivered in as accurate a way and with the intent as much as possible. So anyway, so that's basically it on the toolkit. We do have, oh rats, I'm not going to bring it up quick enough. This why got to be more prepared. I'll tell you, the starting of this, getting off to a poor start, just kind of threw me. If you want to know where you can see that toolkit, I think we have it on a website. I can get that to you. I can't post it right now because I'm not sure where it is. It may not be completely finished either. So maybe stay tuned or message me on Facebook or an email, as I said, and I can show you where that is so you can take a look at it. I want to encourage you one final time, just to be clear. If you are passionate about this and you're saying, I really want my county to pass this, it's better that you go as an encourager of your county commissioners, not as a discourager. You get what I'm saying? Honey instead of vinegar, okay? Tell them why it's important to you. Tell them you're passionate about this. A lot of times elected officials, particularly at the county level, they don't know how to receive all this information. If you put them on the defensive, they're going to act defensive. So ask them, have you received this toolkit? If you have, what are you thinking about it? And listen to them, and then give them your words of encouragement. So that's how I'm going to talk to. I went about 5 minutes over. Actually, from the time that I got started, I'm about 1 to 2 minutes over for my half an hour. Thank you for the encouragement, Richard. I appreciate it. To all of you who are watching this, thank you very much. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please encourage other people to come on and subscribe. I really do hope to improve the quality of this show over time. I want my skill set to improve. I want it to be a little bit more visual, a little bit more entertaining for you, and I promise to do that over time. This is my chance to communicate with you, and to the extent that the chat can communicate back, this should be interactive. I want your input. If you want to talk about something on this show, I want to know from you, and I will bring it up. There's a lot happening here. I kind of pick and choose what I think is maybe most important to you, but I don't always know that. Again, next week, I will probably not be on the air next Wednesday, certainly not at 7 o'clock because I have some meetings I have to go to. Stay tuned. I might be able to get on at 9 o'clock for a show, and whoever can make it can make it. But please let everyone know about this show if you're enjoying it. I thank you very much for your time that you've given me. God bless, and have a good evening.